Russia fired first. That was the plan. That was exactly what Ukraine needed. Days ago on the Eastern Front, Ukrainian military engineers and artillery units executed an operation that required something rare in combat: the willingness to absorb incoming fire on a position you have deliberately made look valuable. While knowing that the moment Russia shoots, Russia has revealed itself. The decoy was perfect, the bait was taken, and when Russian counter-battery radar systems locked onto the fake Ukrainian artillery position, and Russian guns opened up on coordinates that contained nothing but carefully constructed imitations of real military equipment, Ukrainian counter-battery teams, already aimed, already waiting, destroyed the Russian artillery that had just revealed itself. This is the story of a trap built not from weapons but from deception, and this is what it cost Russia to take that bait. The concept of a decoy artillery position is not new in warfare. Military forces have used dummy positions, fake equipment, and deliberate deception operations to manipulate enemy fires since the first artillerymen realized that revealing your position to fire also revealed your position to incoming fire. What is new? What Ukrainian forces have developed into a refined operational capability through years of fighting in eastern Ukraine is the integration of decoy operations with real-time counter-battery fires in a way that turns the enemy's own targeting process against itself. The setup for this engagement began approximately 72 hours before the first Russian round landed. Ukrainian military engineers and artillery personnel worked at night to construct a decoy position at a location on the Eastern Front that met specific criteria. The site had to be visible to Russian drone observation at the angles and altitudes that Russian reconnaissance platforms typically use. It had to be in a location that Russian fires planning would assess as operationally significant, close enough to the contact line to plausibly be a real fire support position, with terrain features suggesting it could support artillery operations against Russian positions. And it had to be positioned so that the Russian artillery battery that was expected to engage it would reveal itself to Ukrainian counter-battery systems that were already positioned and ready to respond. The construction of the decoy was detailed. Ukrainian engineers placed decommissioned equipment, vehicle hulks, tube shapes constructed from available materials, canvas structures designed to replicate the thermal signatures of artillery systems when viewed from above. Thermal signature management is critical in modern warfare. Ukrainian engineers use small heat sources embedded in the decoy structures to produce infrared signatures consistent with artillery systems that had been recently firing. Warm tubes, running engines, the thermal residue of operational equipment. From above, in the thermal spectrum that Russian reconnaissance drones use, the decoy position looked like an active Ukrainian artillery battery. The second component of the deception was the radio traffic. Ukrainian electronic warfare and communications personnel broadcast false radio traffic in the frequency ranges, and with the formatting characteristics of real Ukrainian artillery unit communications, fire mission requests, ammunition reports, position coordination calls. The content was calibrated to sound like a battery that was actively engaged in fire support operations, one that had recently fired several missions and was preparing for additional tasking. Russian electronic intelligence collection would intercept this traffic. Russian fires planners would cross-reference it with the visual signature from their drone observation. The combination of thermal signature and intercepted communications would confirm what Russian analysts were supposed to conclude. There was a Ukrainian artillery battery at those coordinates, and it was active. The third component was patience. Ukrainian commanders did not need Russian forces to engage the decoy immediately. They needed Russian forces to engage it when Ukrainian counter-battery teams were in position, ready, and pre-registered against the most likely Russian firing positions. That readiness took time to establish. Artillery units had to be moved. Firing positions had to be prepared. Counter-battery radar had to be positioned to cover the sectors where Russian artillery was most likely to be operating. The decoy was activated, thermal signatures switched on, radio traffic begun. Only when Ukrainian commanders assessed that all components of the counter-battery response package were in place. Russian reconnaissance activity over the decoy position, observed by Ukrainian Overwatch drones, began within hours of the decoy's activation. Russian drone operators, acquiring the thermal signatures and correlating them with the intercepted radio traffic, had apparently assessed the position as genuine. The observation pattern, multiple overflights at varying altitudes consistent with a targeting sequence, indicated that Russian fires planners were developing a strike package against the position. Ukrainian commanders watched the Russian targeting process develop and made the decision to wait for Russian fires to engage rather than preemptively strike the Russian artillery positions that counter-battery radar was beginning to locate. Preemptive engagement would destroy some Russian artillery assets, but would also reveal to Russian commanders that their targeting had been compromised, potentially causing them to relocate surviving assets before Ukrainian fires could achieve the full destruction that the situation offered. Waiting for Russian fires to actually engage the decoy meant accepting the risk of additional Russian observation and the possibility of Russian suspicion being raised by something about the decoy's appearance or behavior. Ukrainian commanders judged the wait was worth it. The Russian counter-battery strike arrived in the pre-dawn hours of the following morning. Multiple artillery systems fired simultaneously against the decoy coordinates, a weight of fire consistent with a serious counter-battery mission against what Russian fires planners had assessed was a significant Ukrainian fire support asset. The rounds landed on the decoy position. They destroyed equipment that had been specifically constructed to be destroyed. The thermal signatures went cold. The radio traffic stopped. Russian fires planners, monitoring the results, would have assessed the mission as successful. It was the last assessment those specific gun crews would make. Ukrainian counter-battery radar had been tracking the incoming Russian rounds from the moment they left the tubes. The back-azimuth calculations, the mathematical process of tracing the trajectory of incoming rounds back to their point of origin, gave Ukrainian counter-battery teams the firing positions of the Russian artillery systems with a precision sufficient for immediate engagement. The fire mission data was already prepared. The guns were already aimed. The moment Russian rounds landed on the decoy, Ukrainian counter-battery fires were already in flight toward the Russian positions. The Russian artillery battery that had fired the counter-battery mission was in the process of executing its own shoot-and-scoot procedure when Ukrainian rounds arrived. Self-propelled artillery systems can move within minutes of completing a fire mission. The standard procedure that Russian crews used to avoid exactly the counter-battery response that was now landing on them. The timing worked against them. Ukrainian counter-battery fires arrived before the Russian systems had completed their repositioning. The rounds found the artillery pieces in the transition between their firing position and the movement that was supposed to protect them. A moment of maximum vulnerability. Partially displaced from cover, not yet at the next concealed position. 3 Russian self-propelled artillery systems were destroyed in the counter-battery fires. A 4th was damaged and subsequently immobilized when it attempted to move with a damaged track system. The crew of one of the destroyed vehicles managed to dismount before the vehicle was hit. The crews of the other 3 did not. But the engagement did not end with the artillery systems. The Russian counter-battery radar station that had been supporting the targeting process, the system that had confirmed the Ukrainian decoy's coordinates and had been monitoring the results of the Russian strike, had positioned itself in a location that Ukrainian electronic intelligence had been tracking since the decoy operation began. Counter-battery radar stations emit distinctive electronic signatures when they are operating in active mode. Ukrainian electronic warfare teams had been monitoring those signatures and had established the radar's position with sufficient confidence to include it in the engagement sequence. Ukrainian precision fires, a drone-delivered munition guided to the coordinates established by Ukrainian electronic intelligence, struck the radar station as its crew was processing the results of what they believe was a successful counter-battery strike on a Ukrainian artillery battery. The radar system was destroyed. The specialized operators who managed it, the technical personnel who understood the system's operation, who maintained its calibration, and who processed the targeting data it generated, were killed or wounded. The loss of a counter-battery radar system is, in operational terms, a significant degradation of Russian artillery employment capability. These systems, the 1L-219 Zoopark and similar platforms that Russian forces use for counter-battery location, are the sensors that allow Russian artillery to locate and engage Ukrainian fires assets. Without them, Russian counter-battery operations rely on visual observation and electronic intelligence that are less precise, slower to generate, and more easily deceived. A Russian artillery grouping that has lost its dedicated counter-battery radar is a grouping that cannot efficiently find and engage Ukrainian artillery, which means Ukrainian artillery can operate with lower risk and higher tempo. Now let us account for what Russia lost in this engagement. 3 2S-19 MSTAS self-propelled howitzers destroyed, 1 additional vehicle immobilized, and subsequently abandoned. The 2S-19 MSTAS carries a replacement cost of approximately $3 to $4 million USD per unit under pre-war pricing, and substantially higher, estimated $4.5 to $6 million under current sanctions-constrained production conditions. 4 artillery systems at a combined replacement cost of $18 to $24 million. The counter-battery radar system destroyed. The 1L219 Zupark 1 radar, or a comparable system, carries a procurement cost of $15 to $20 million USD. These are sophisticated electronic systems that cannot be easily manufactured under current Russian industrial conditions. The microelectronics and signal processing components that make a modern counter-battery radar function are precisely the categories of component most affected by Western export controls and sanctions. Russia does not have an unlimited supply of these systems, and every one destroyed is a sensor capability gap that is difficult to fill. Artillery crew losses. The specialized personnel who operated the destroyed systems. At minimum, 4 gun crews of 3 to 5 personnel each, plus the radar station operators, representing between 20 and 30 trained military personnel with specialized skills that take 18 months to 3 years to develop at a professional level. Total material cost, conservatively $33 to $44 million USD, for a counter-battery mission that destroyed a position containing nothing of operational value. The operational cost compounds the materiel figure. The Russian front section that conducted this counter-battery strike has lost a significant portion of its organic artillery capability and its primary sensor for locating Ukrainian fires assets. Ukrainian artillery in the sector can now operate with greater freedom, conducting fire missions with reduced risk of effective Russian counter-battery response, supporting Ukrainian defensive and offensive operations with a fire support tempo that the degraded Russian counter-battery capability cannot efficiently suppress. Ukrainian military engineers who spent nights in the cold building, a fake artillery position, Ukrainian electronic warfare teams who broadcast false radio traffic calibrated to deceive Russian intelligence collection, Ukrainian counter-battery radar operators who tracked incoming rounds to their source and fed target data to waiting gun crews. Each of them contributed to an outcome that destroyed tens of millions of dollars in Russian capability in exchange for the cost of a deception operation and the ammunition expended in the counter-battery fires. Russia aimed its weapons at a carefully constructed illusion. Ukraine was already aiming back at the guns that fired. The decoy burned. 3 Russian howitzers burned, 1 Russian radar burned, and the Ukrainian artillery that Russia was trying to destroy is still operational, still in position, still supporting the Ukrainian defenders who are holding the Eastern Front. Ukraine deceives, Ukraine strikes back, Ukraine holds. To fully appreciate what this operation achieved, it is necessary to step back from the immediate engagement and examine the broader context of counter-battery warfare on the Eastern Front. Because the destruction of Russia's counter-battery radar is not simply a material loss. It is a structural degradation of Russian artillery employment that will affect every fire mission Russian guns attempt to conduct in this sector for as long as the capability gap remains. Artillery in modern warfare is not simply a matter of pointing guns at targets and firing. It is a system, a collection of interdependent capabilities that includes observation, targeting, communications, fire control, and counter-battery protection. Each element of the system enables the others. Take away one element and the system degrades. Take away the right element and the system can be brought to the edge of dysfunction. Counter-battery radar is one of those right elements. Without it, a Russian artillery battery firing a support mission in eastern Ukraine is doing so knowing that Ukrainian counter-battery teams may be tracking its rounds from the moment they leave the tube, tracing them back to the firing position, and generating targeting data that will result in incoming fires within minutes of the Russian mission being completed. With counter-battery radar, a Russian battery can conduct its own tracking of Ukrainian fires and engage Ukrainian guns before they have the opportunity to respond. The radar creates a competitive counter-battery environment. Both sides are tracking each other, engaging each other, trying to destroy the other's guns before being destroyed themselves. Remove the radar and the competition becomes one-sided. Ukrainian counter-battery teams can track Russian fires. Russian batteries cannot efficiently track Ukrainian fires. The advantage shifts substantially. This is the operational significance of the radar system that Ukrainian precision fires destroyed in this engagement. Its destruction did not silence Russian artillery in the sector. It degraded the ability of Russian artillery commanders to know where Ukrainian fires were coming from, to engage Ukrainian guns in return, and to protect their own batteries from the counter-battery response that every Russian fire mission now risks provoking. Russian artillery in the sector will continue to fire, but it will fire with reduced confidence, at reduced tempo, with increased shoot and scoot frequency, and reduced time on target, all of which reduces the effectiveness of Russian fire support for the ground operations that depend on it. The deception operation that enabled this outcome deserves specific examination as an example of what Ukrainian military ingenuity has developed under the pressure of sustained conflict. The engineers and communications personnel who built and operated the decoy were not working from a textbook. They were applying principles: thermal signature management, electronic emission simulation, visual signature construction, that Ukrainian forces have refined through operational experience over years of fighting against a technologically capable opponent who has been trying to develop counter-deception measures throughout the conflict. The thermal signature management component is particularly worth examining. Modern Russian reconnaissance drones carry thermal imaging sensors that allow them to distinguish between real and fake equipment in many circumstances. A vehicle hulk with no engine running, a canvas tube with no heat source, a static object with no operational emissions will not fool a thermal sensor looking for the specific heat patterns of operating military equipment. Ukrainian engineers who constructed this decoy understood this. They embedded heat sources calibrated to produce signatures consistent with recently fired artillery. Warm tubes, running engines, the residual heat of an operational battery that has recently conducted fire missions. The calibration of those heat sources, matching the thermal intensity and pattern of real equipment rather than simply producing heat, reflects a level of technical understanding of Russian sensor capabilities that Ukrainian forces have developed specifically through observing how Russian targeting works and what it responds to. The radio traffic component represents a similar level of operational sophistication. Broadcasting on Russian-monitored frequencies in formats that would survive electronic intelligence analysis required Ukrainian communications personnel to understand not just what Russian ELINT collection is looking for, but how it processes and validates what it finds. Amateur radio traffic, obvious in its construction, inconsistent in its format, identifiable as a simulation, would not have achieved the deception. The traffic that Ukrainian operators broadcast was calibrated to pass the validation filters that Russian intelligence analysts supply to intercepted communications. That calibration required either detailed knowledge of Russian ELINT processing procedures or iterative learning from previous deception operations where Ukrainian forces observed Russian response and adjusted their simulation accordingly. Almost certainly it was both. The patience dimension of this operation is also worth acknowledging specifically. Ukrainian commanders had the option to engage the Russian artillery and radar systems that counter-battery detection was revealing at any point during the 72-hour decoy operation. They chose not to. They chose to wait, to allow the full targeting process to develop, to allow Russian confidence in their assessment to build to the point of fire mission execution, so that the counter-battery response would catch Russian systems at maximum vulnerability rather than simply alert. That decision required confidence in the decoy's integrity, confidence in the readiness of Ukrainian counter-battery assets, and the operational nerve to accept additional risk in exchange for a more complete outcome. The outcome vindicated the decision. 3 destroyed howitzers and a destroyed radar system are a substantially better result than 2 howitzers and a relocated radar that survived because Ukrainian fires arrived while the decoy was still unconfirmed. The Russian artillery crews who conducted the counter-battery strike on the decoy position were operating within their doctrine and their training. They identified a target through the combined use of radar, drone observation, and electronic intelligence. They developed a fire mission. They executed it. They believed at the moment their rounds landed that they had successfully destroyed a Ukrainian artillery battery and contributed to degrading Ukrainian fire support capability in the sector. In those final seconds before Ukrainian counter-battery fires arrived at their positions, they may have felt the satisfaction of a mission completed. They had not destroyed anything real. They had confirmed their own positions to a Ukrainian counter-battery system that was already tracking them. The howitzers that were conducting that mission, the crews that had trained on those specific systems, that understood their fire control procedures, that had developed the operational tempo and crew coordination that makes an artillery battery effective in combat, are gone. The radar station that supported the targeting process is gone. The specialist operators who maintained that radar and processed its data are gone. And the Ukrainian artillery battery that Russia was trying to destroy is still operational. The Ukrainian defenders it supports are still in their positions. The eastern front that Russia has been trying to break through is still holding. Russia aimed at a phantom and revealed itself. Ukraine was already aiming at the guns. This is what military deception looks like when it is executed by professionals who have spent years learning exactly how their opponent thinks, exactly what their opponent looks for, and exactly how to construct an illusion that guides that opponent into a position of maximum vulnerability. Ukrainian forces did not win this engagement because they had better weapons. They won it because they understood Russia's targeting process better than Russia understood Ukraine's deception. That asymmetry of understanding, accumulated through years of fighting, through observation of Russian methods, through the painful education of engagements that went wrong before the current ones go right, is not a capability that can be purchased or transferred. It is earned. Ukrainian commanders and soldiers have earned it on the Eastern Front, in cold April conditions, against an opponent that has been trying just as hard to understand and exploit Ukrainian methods in return. Russia fired first, Ukraine was already ready, and the guns that fired are gone. Ukraine deceives. Ukraine destroys. Ukraine holds the front. One more dimension of this engagement deserves to be stated plainly before we close, because it connects the technical details of a deception operation to something more fundamental about the nature of this conflict. Ukraine is fighting this war on its own territory. The Eastern Front that Ukrainian defenders are holding is Ukrainian ground. Fields, towns, roads, river crossings that Ukrainian people have lived on and worked on for generations. When Ukrainian engineers build a decoy artillery position in that ground, they are doing it with the knowledge that Russian counter-battery fires will land on Ukrainian soil. The fires that hit the decoy were landing on their own country. The engineers who built it knew that. They built it anyway, because the purpose was not to protect the ground under the decoy. It was to protect the Ukrainian soldiers and the real Ukrainian artillery that the decoy was designed to draw fire away from. That willingness to absorb incoming fire on positions deliberately made to look valuable, on ground that is your own country's ground, reflects a quality of commitment that does not have a material cost equivalent. Russia cannot buy it. Russia cannot manufacture it. It comes from fighting for something that is genuinely yours. Ukrainian forces deceived Russia into revealing its artillery. Ukrainian counter-battery teams destroyed what Russia revealed. Ukrainian defenders are still on the line. Russia fired first. It was the last thing those gun crews did.